Fade in. Los Angeles, California. Interior, house. Day. Introduce protagonist. Hi, I'm Allie, and I have a problem. I read scripts and novels for people and critique and edit to help them. But I keep running into the same problem with their protagonists. So what am I going to do? To help my problem, I'm going to be active and make a video. That was just for fun. Hey, it's me again, Allie, and I'm here to talk about your protagonist. I read other people's scripts and books, and I help them make them better. And I keep running into the same sort of issues in every single script or novel that I read. So I wanted to do a video about it to see if I can help. We're talking about protagonists today, and I'm going to talk about the 8 most common problems that I see in scripts and novels to do with the protagonist. Number 1, your protagonist is reactive. This means they're passive. They are just sort of there and things are happening to them. When a protagonist is reactive, then things are just sort of happening to them. Things are just falling into their laps and they're dealing with it. Reactive protagonist is someone who has a problem, they have something they're dealing with, and along the way, things are happening to them and they're reacting. They're making choices, they're deciding what to do, and things are happening based on those decisions, possibly leading to bigger problems that they have to react to. The problem with a protagonist who's just reactive is that it tells us that there is nothing wrong with them. There's nothing going on in their life that's personal to them. There's no problem. There's no, Allie needs to accomplish this, or Allie wants this. It's sort of like they're just there and things are happening. And it's sort of like a slice of life, and those stories are perfectly fine if done the right way by the right writer-director sort of situation, sort of like the Florida Project. That was sort of a little bit of a slice of life, but our protagonist still had problems. She wanted to keep her child, she wanted to better her life. These things were still happening in the background, even though they weren't thrown in your face. There's always something the protagonist wants or doesn't want. They may still be an interesting character. You may have written a very interesting character with likes and dislikes and mannerisms and the way they speak and what they've gone through in their past. But now you've introduced them and they're still just there and things are just happening to them. They need to actually be doing things. You need your protagonist to have a stake in your story. What do they want and how are they going to get it? And that's how you should start the story. If you have this big world imagined in your head of all these things happening, that's great, but try to streamline first and think, who is going to be going through all these events? Why? What do they want? And how can these things I'm thinking of happening to them make it harder for them so that they can react to them and make choices? I also see protagonists where being reactive is their trait, as in they are just a conduit or a sim or a robot who is just moving along on this plot with literally nothing else going on. They are just a bland character reacting. They don't even have traits, and I actually see this a lot. They're just an average person with no real backstory, with not a lot of traits going on, but they are experiencing things in their world, and it still doesn't change their wants. It's one thing if you have a reactive protagonist who then discovers what they want or what they don't want based on things happening to them. That's fine, but if that never happens, then you got a problem. I'm starting to see this a lot with people who are trying to write more female protagonists. I think it's great. We need female protagonists, and let's write more of them in screenplays. But you can't just say, I have a female protagonist going through all this stuff. And my script is high concept because it's a woman that's leading the story. But what about this woman? What is she? What does she want? Where does she come from? What has she been through in her life? How does she feel about people in her life? What happened to her to make her the way she is? Can we develop some layers to this woman so that she's not just going through something, and give her a strong want and a strong desire? Number 2, who is the protagonist? I can't tell you how many times I see this. It's actually always fun to read these stories when there's a lot of characters, but if I'm starting to wonder who I should be following, then there's maybe a problem. I always give the script or the book the benefit of the doubt, and I read it all the way through before I start writing things. But if it takes me to the end of the story to figure out who I was supposed to be following, then that might be a challenging aspect of your script or your novel in which you should maybe try to figure out who you want to focus on. Maybe there's 2 protagonists, and as long as they are both offering enough to the plot. I wrote a series, which I still love and I hope to pitch one day. It's got a main protagonist who's dealing with memory problems throughout the entire series, and then you have his best friend who is also stuck in this place. They're stuck in this place, and he knows everything, but he can't tell him, so he's also a protagonist. Sometimes he ventures into antagonist mode, which I think sometimes second protagonists can do that. But if you introduce a scene in a novel or a screenplay and you list like 7 people and descriptions of them, for me as a reader personally, I get confused right away. And then I have to open a document, I have to write all the names out and who they are, and I have to keep going back and forth, back and forth. I don't want to have to do that while I'm reading something. I want to know who I'm following and who's most important. Who are the supporting characters that are going to come in and out? That's all that I care about. Who are we following? Pick a person. Number 3, who your protagonist surrounds themselves with. Now, you may have written a very interesting protagonist and they have a goal, they have a want, and they have a means to attain that goal. But they are surrounded by brainless, mindless Sims? I like to use Sims a lot because I love The Sims. But they're sort of just these like, you know when there's a fire on The Sims and they just like, and then next thing you know, they're on fire. They're not offering any help. They're not making it worse. They're just there. We don't want supporting characters who are just there. I mean, you can do that, but why not make them more important? Supporting characters should be either helping your protagonists or harming them. They don't have to be harming them like an antagonist. They just need to be making things a little bit more difficult just because of the way that they are. Maybe they're annoying. Maybe it's a sibling who needs money and they don't have money. Or maybe it's a parent who keeps nagging them. Anything to add problems to their attaining of their goal. Also, the supporting characters should be just as layered as your protagonist. Spend some time getting to know these people. Who are they and what are they like? Are they, is it somebody who's very sarcastic and witty and dry, but the second that they talk about emotions, they sort of freeze up? That was such a stupid stereotype, but that was just what came to my mind. And maybe your protagonist, this is their best friend, and normally they wouldn't need so much depth to them, but they're going through something really hard and they need their best friend to be there, and they're not there for them because they can't, because they're just not that type of person, and that can cause some relationship problems and some conflict, and that's good. And it doesn't have to do with the main plot, it's just making things harder for your protagonist. Again, if you have a male protagonist and they have females around them as the supporting players, please make them different from each other. Please make girl A different from girl B, and please make them interesting and make them want something themselves. Make them, again, have them create conflict for the protagonist in any way. And it doesn't have to be like an intimate, romantic, or sexual reason, which I tend to see a lot. Yes, stories with intense, intimate, romantic, and sexual problems, they're always going to do well. We love to read about relationships because, I mean, that's like what we do in our life, right? We're just going around having relationships with people. And so we want to read about it because it makes us feel like we're not alone. Perhaps it's just my female perspective. I just don't always want the female supporting characters to be some kind of intimate romantic problem. I like when they are more involved, like more detective-like, or they're more maybe antagonistic. Maybe they're the ones who are aggressive and they're putting the protagonist in these bad situations. Number 4, no goals. This goes back to the first one about them being reactive, but they can still be a character who's not reactive, but they just still don't have a very clear goal. I find myself reading scripts and books where I still don't know what this person wants. And a lot of writers think they can get away with it by starting a story and the person has lost someone and they're really sad. Or they lost their job and they're sad. Or something horrible happened to them and they're dealing with the PTSD of it. I know a lot of stories are good this way, that start off with someone dealing with trauma. But early on, we still must know what they want in that whole thing. I read so many stories where somebody starts off sad and then they're just sad for the whole thing and reactive. If a character is mourning something or they have PTSD, they still want something, and you have to remember that. Do they want it to go away? Do they want to make it better? How are they going to make it go away? How are they going to make themselves feel better? You could imagine some very negative disassociations they could involve themselves in to make themselves feel better. They could drink, they could do drugs, they could have sex, they could get involved with the wrong people, they could hurt themselves. There's a lot of things that this person can do to try to make themselves feel better. Do they want to seek revenge on somebody for whatever happened? Is it a mystery what happened to them and they want to figure out who, what, where, when, why? You see, just because the character is mourning or has PTSD or is sad or starts off depressed or is a really, really damaged character, it doesn't mean they don't want anything, and it doesn't mean you can lean on their really strong emotions to drive the plot. Number 5, where is your protagonist? I might know who the protagonist is, but I don't see them for a long time. This happens in screenplays a lot because their writers get busy world building, and sometimes you should leave that for the book. In the screenplay, I want to be with the protagonist as much as possible. Keep them in as many scenes as you can. I want to see them, this is just me personally, I want to see them in 80% of the script. At least they're mentioned if they're not there. A lot of times in screenplays specifically, things are happening behind the scenes with like bad guys or people who are out to get somebody, or family who's worried about them, and I don't know where they are for a long time. Suddenly your protagonist appears again, and I'm like, oh, okay, I was worried that maybe there was a new protagonist all of a sudden. Make sure that they are always there, they're always doing something, and they're always trying to attain their goal. Every single scene, they should be trying to attain their goal. Let no scene be wasted. Let no line or sentence of dialogue be wasted. It is all to do with what they want and how they're going to get it. Number 6, your protagonist is a nobody. They have no nuances, they have no interesting traits, it's a character we've all seen before, perhaps it's a stereotype, perhaps it's just something you've got inspiration from in another book or another TV series and you didn't develop it further based on that, so it's kind of like a copy of something else. I copy characters all the time. I get inspired from a movie or a TV show or a book and I think, I want to write a character like that. And I start off with the exact copy of that. But then I move out because you can't copy that character. Also, it's kind of boring like that and it's a waste of your time. You should be learning and growing as a writer and creating interesting characters. So if you're gonna do that, make sure you develop them further, add different traits from that person that you know, from that other book, from this idea, dark side of yourself, anything. Bring all these things into this character and create some kind of depth. How do they walk? How do they hold themselves? Do they pause a lot before they talk? Are they somebody who is always just like cursed with awkward silences themselves? Like they create the awkward silences and it's because they're thinking a lot, or maybe it's because they're nervous, or because they want to make other people nervous. Do they stutter? Do they have a hard time getting their words out? Are they very, very smart, but they just have trouble with the connectors and trying to say what they mean? That's my problem. Are they always scratching themselves? Are they always cracking their neck when they're stressed out? Do they talk one way to somebody and then another way to somebody else? How they talk to a child is gonna be different than how they talk to an adult. How they talk to somebody from their past who they really don't wanna see anymore is different than how they talk to their wife, who they love. Are they a daydreamer? Do they scoff a lot? Do they have one of those like weird laughs when they're talking? I know people like that. When they're talking, do they start off calm and then all of a sudden they get really angry and then they calm themselves down? I know people like that. You can write somebody who has a bad temper and that's their personality. For instance, I might think of someone I know. They're always ready to fight somebody. They're ready to get a fight. They're ready to defend themselves. They're ready to defend that, this, up, down, upside down. They're gonna get into a fight. And it's almost like they're looking for it and they have a bad temper and they're easily set off. But how can you add depth to that? I like to use astrology sometimes when I'm writing characters, especially for my protagonists. I might think of somebody with a bad temper who's screaming all the time as a Leo. Sorry, Leos. But do you know what else there is about Leos? Is that they're very, very, very generous and big-hearted, and they will do anything for those that they love. Even if they hate you at the moment, they will give all of themselves to you. They may scream about it, but they will still give it to you. Do you see how I just made a character have depth? They don't just have a temper, they're not just looking for a fight, but they also are so loyal and they are so loving. So they're also always easily hurt by people, and eventually this probably will get to them over time. They will develop grudges and they will get crazy. I just sort of created a character right there. Number 7, they're too honest. People have told me this in the past in my projects a while ago, and I never really understood what they meant until I started seeing it for myself. Characters don't just say how they feel all the time. We just don't. Humans keep so much hidden. They don't talk about every little thing going on in their head, or what they're feeling, or their grudges, or their anger, or their sadness, or their happiness. They just don't talk about it. They find other ways to let it out. It should be like you have a little bag of bread and you're just scattering breadcrumbs throughout on the ground in your story, letting them experience some little bits of emotion. Sometimes they say how they feel, and it grows and grows and grows and grows and grows until, of course, at the end, they're gonna have some kind of emotional breakthrough. All their pain will finally surface and they may talk about it. They're definitely not going to say everything. Nobody knows exactly what's going on inside of them. Nobody knows. They can only know a fraction of it, and you should think of your characters the same way. Your protagonist shouldn't just go around saying how they feel about everything. Keep things hidden. Make it more realistic. Number 8, they are inconsistent. I recently read a script where the main character was this woman who was, she was tough. I'm going to use probably some stereotypical words to describe her here, just to get my point across. She was tough. She was kind of like, you know, a boy's girl, tomboy. She liked guns. She liked to fight. She taught self-defense. You didn't want to mess with her. And in that story, that character was weeping a lot and very easily. Now, this is fine. You may think, well, that's depth. But before you make a character scream, cry, express happiness, express love, express a grudge, or an annoyance, ask yourself, based on who you made, how would they react in this situation? Perhaps someone who is this tough girl, sure, they have emotions, yes, but they might not just go around weeping and sobbing all the time. They don't always have to have tears rolling down their cheeks in every scene, because then I'm thinking, I thought she was so tough. You know, that person can have a lot of emotions, but I want to see them trying not to cry. You know, especially if they're a parent, try not to cry in front of your kids. Try not to just sob in public. That's what I might expect from that kind of character. You want them to have if they went through something traumatic in the past and that's where we're starting the story, it's actually more interesting if they don't release all their emotions till way later. Or if you want them to have the feelings in the beginning, maybe it's in private. A lot of people cry in private, or they say, excuse me, and they go and they cry somewhere else. You know, I read a lot of scripts and stories where people are just crying out in the open, and I just feel it's a little too unrealistic. It's also a case where it might be inconsistent with who they actually are. Also, they may be inconsistent with other actions as well. You have to take a look at what they're doing and how they're doing it. Does it make sense for who they are? Are they acting and reacting based on their traits, or is it just serving your plot? Like I said, I read people's scripts and books for them, and I critique and I edit, and I keep seeing these similar things pop up, so I thought maybe I could help. And I constantly get asked these kinds of questions by people who know that I write, friends, or people that I have worked with on set and things like that. So this is one of the things that I see the most. So hope that was helpful, you guys. Protagonist signing off this video, but not signing off life. All right, bye guys.